Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, July 29th, 2024. In a moment, Larry Johnson will be here on the latest that we have on the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump and the latest we have on a pretext for war in northern Israel. But first, this. You all know that I am a paid spokesperson for Lear Capital, but I'm also a customer, a very satisfied customer. About a year ago, I bought gold and it's now increased in value 23%. So $100 invested in gold a year ago is now worth $123. If you have $100 in the bank, it still shows $100, but $100 in the bank is now worth 24% less. Inflation has reduced all of your savings, all of your buying power, and mine by 24%. And gold is largely immune from that. If you want to learn how gold will soon hit $3,200 an ounce, call Lear Capital, 800-511-4620, or go to LearJudgeSnap.com. Get your free gold report. Same experts who predicted the 23% rise that I've enjoyed have predicted this $3,200 an ounce gold. Learn about how to transfer this to an IRA. Protect your savings. 800-511-4620, LearJudgeSnap.com. Tell them the judge sent you. Larry Johnson, welcome back, my dear friend. And thank you, Larry, for all the time you were able to spend with me while I was 4,000 miles from here. Those segments we did were very popular and much appreciated.
You're welcome.
What is your latest take on the assassination attempt? Was Crook a patsy for sinister forces? Was he a lone wolf? Was he trained? Did he know what he was doing? Did he plan it? Did anybody help him wittingly or unwittingly? Just give us your latest handle 2 weeks after the event.
It is very unlikely that he was a lone wolf. Who was helping him, who he was working with, that is to be determined. My friends, former Secret Service agents, they are increasingly alarmed and disturbed as more and more information comes out about the egregious lapses, complete abandonment of Secret Service standard operating procedures. They have rules of engagement. They have processes that are supposed to be followed in doing advanced work. They have procedures to be followed in running tactical operations centers, the TOCs, the command centers. None of this was followed. It was all like it was a deliberate decision to abandon it. And then the questions that surround Crooks, whether or not he was deliberately killed to keep him silent, or he was actually killed because they finally got eyes on him at the last minute. It's unclear. And it hasn't been helped by the fact that the FBI continues to muddy the waters with that, I got to watch my language with Christopher Wray. Here's the man who's the director of the FBI, and he doesn't even know the difference between a cartridge, which is a fully intact round of ammunition, and a shell casing. Because a shell casing is what you get after you fire a piece of round of ammunition. And yet he testifies before Congress and said they found 8 cartridges. That's problem number one. Problem number two, there's a videotape out with a Secret Service talking to some of the police, and they're standing over the body, and they said they found 5 shell casings. So which is it, 8 or 5? Then, Ray goes on to suggest that, I'm not sure that Donald Trump got hit by a bullet. It's like, wait. You're supposed to deal with facts, not speculation. But in fact, we know for sure is that there was somebody shooting guns, a gun or guns at Donald Trump. Okay? That's the fact. And so this just illustrates the problems with this deep state, that the corruption is endemic. And the good news is we've got information coming out from the local SWAT team, the local police, because they're not about to get thrown under the bus over this. So they're starting to rat out the Secret Service, their failings.
Let's go over some basics. When the Secret Service is protecting a person, the president, a former president, a presidential candidate, and it involves law enforcement from other non-federal agencies, isn't it true that the Secret Service is always in charge?
Yes. No, absolutely. But part of that being in charge means you sit down beforehand. You find out who your points of contact are. You agree upon what the means of communication will be. You explain what your procedures are and find out if the locals have any problems with that or will have any difficulty in fulfilling that. And it's everything from medical plans that if there is a need to evacuate the principal, how are you going to do that? What kind of medical facilities are available there locally? Everything up to and including counter sniper teams, what rules of engagement are, under what circumstances do you fire or not fire, what are you supposed to look at? And the most important part is communication, that all information is funneled back into that command center, and the person in charge then is able to make the appropriate decisions. And that's where the real failure came here. And to make matters worse, Judge, the new director, the acting director, who was the deputy director, he was the one actually in charge of this overall oversight of how security details are being run. So they've done the equivalent of putting the fox in charge of guarding the hen house.
When Crooks was on the roof and before he fired and people saw him, is it probable that other snipers thought he was one of theirs?
No, not at all. And that's what we don't know yet is to hear. We've got to hear from the various counter snipers. When did they first spot him? When did they realize he had a firearm? And why did they not shoot him sooner? Because the rule of engagement for Secret Service is if you've got somebody within let's call it the sterile area, the area that's supposed to be secure, with a firearm that's not Secret Service, you shoot them. You do not give them a chance to get a shot off.
Do the snipers communicate with each other or with Central Command? I mean,
Yeah.
would one sniper have said, "Who is this guy?"
Yeah, no, there's supposed to be radio traffic and communications. There have been, contradictory stories. Some insisting that those recordings exist, others saying that they were erased. But that's where it's important, I think, for Congress specifically to bring the counter snipers in, sit them at a table, all four of them. I think there were at least four, maybe there were more, and ask them what were your conversations that day, what were your rules of engagement, because they will have radio communication, headsets on and ability to talk to each other, because certainly out in a crowd and when you're outdoors, you don't want to be shouting at each other.
Right. And you certainly don't want snipers shooting at each other because they don't know who the other snipers are.
Correct.
It's interesting that he was attired as the snipers were, totally in black.
No, he wasn't. That's the point. He was actually wearing like a green T-shirt and had on beige, maybe khaki colored shorts. That's what's actually sort of interesting. That he's crawling up on this metal roof in shorts, and it's a hot day, and people don't understand that those roofs can get extraordinarily hot to the point it can cause second-degree burns.
Interesting that none of the snipers would have noticed him. There's a lot of stuff on the internet. You don't know whether to believe it or not. Is there any evidence that he had a foreign bank account?
That I have not confirmed. So all we've heard is that there were two encrypted accounts, whether those were bank accounts, social media accounts, telephone account, is not clear. The one piece of evidence that did come out and was done by Heritage Foundation. So they tracked the phones that were associated with the address where he lived, and one of those phones pops up a block from FBI headquarters in Gallery Place there in Washington, D.C. Highly unusual.
I don't know what the explanation for that could possibly be. Is your best judgment is your best judgment that he was a patsy for sinister forces?
I believe that. Let me put it this way: I believe sinister forces were definitely involved. The attempt. This was a design plan to kill Donald Trump, and people to poo-poo that as nonsensical just ignores the reality of what's been taking place with respect to the verbal threats emanating from the Biden administration against Donald Trump, uh, actors and actresses uh, engaging in ritual, simulations of killing Donald Trump, not just one or multiple. So the fact that they want Trump dead is a reminder that he does represent now a very serious threat to the deep state, and it's corrupt. And let's not forget, the FBI and the CIA worked hand in glove together, starting really in 2015, to destroy Donald Trump. They were working together to support the candidacy of Hillary Clinton, and they engaged. It was a broad, massive intelligence effort to go after Trump. So the fact that they're trying to kill him here, and they found some 20-year-old, because this wasn't just some 20-year-old who was good at playing video games. I mean, the kid reportedly built 3 improvised explosive devices, and you just, even though you can go on the internet and you can find the terrorist cookbook for doing that, that's not easy, and it's very difficult. It requires really a level of skill and sophistication that is not normally associated with a 20-year-old in this situation.
What was the distance that he fired? The distance between the end of his weapon and Donald Trump?
140 yards.
And how difficult is it to hit a human being at 140 yards?
Well, it's if you've got time, it's quite doable. So I went out yesterday with my buddy, and we did another test. So we went to 100 yards this time, but it was all controlled. Take your time, exhale, hold your breath, press the trigger. And so I was able to put 9 of 10 shots in an area that was about 8 inches.
With a scope or without?
With the red dot optic, but I had a better optic. It wasn't magnified, so it's doable. But that's not what he was doing. To do what he was doing, his first shot, yeah, it's possible to get off that accurate shot. Everything after that was going to be wildly inaccurate because he was firing rapidly, and there is no way in the world, and I don't care how good a marksman you are, that you can fire 4 to 5 rapid shots within 3 seconds, 5 seconds max, and that they're going to be within that grouping. They're going to be quite spread out. So you've got the factor that he was carrying a rifle that was not optimal for this, but nonetheless capable of killing, and then a remote controlled detonator to, I guess, allegedly blow up those explosives in the van in order to create a distraction so he could escape. And he also knew where to position himself on the roof so that he'd be out of sight of at least one of the counter sniper teams. So, this is a level of planning that I just don't chalk up to luck. He had assistance.
Wow. All right, switching gears, Larry, and thank you for monitoring this for us as professionally and effectively as you've done. Why do you have an opinion as to why Chinese and Russian jets were circling off the coast of Alaska last week?
Yeah, they're tit for tat. They're doing the same thing. Here's NATO been flying jets and B-1 bombers and B-52s up to the border of Russia, up in the Baltic Sea. So we don't report that. We always report, oh, the Russians and Chinese are doing this, without any context about what the United States has been doing. So we've been doing as much tweaking as they are.
Ships arriving over the weekend, Russian ships arriving over the weekend in Havana Harbor. These are warships, I assume. They're not cruising. They're not cruiser ships.
Yeah. Well, these have been in the plans for a while. I mean, they didn't decide 2-3 weeks ago, hey, set sail for Cuba. But you need to look at this in the context of what Vladimir Putin said in a speech yesterday, that if the United States proceeds with deploying those intermediate range nuclear missiles in Europe, then Russia is going to deploy them in places that'll be as vulnerable, make the United States feel equally vulnerable.
Here's
So
what
this
he
is
said. Yeah, here's exactly what he said yesterday, which is just what you said, Larry. Cut number one.
The situation recalls the events of the Cold War era. If the U.S. implements such plans, we will consider ourselves free from the previously imposed one-sided moratorium on the deployment of medium and shorter range strike systems. We will take mirror measures for their deployment.
What does that mean, mirror measures for their deployment, Larry?
so if we deploy it in Germany, they'll deploy it in Cuba. There's one example. They'll make sure that the missiles go in a place where it can hit our interests. So this is heading us back towards a new Cuban Missile Crisis. Only this time, I don't think Russia's going to back down at all, because I think Russia is completely fed up with the bullying and the insanity of what the United States is doing. The United States has been funding the wars, not Russia. And Russia has, people don't like to hear it, but it has been self-defense. And you bring that up in the United States, and immediately you're a puppet of Putin. Well,
Right. Right.
So be it.
What are your thoughts on the attack on the soccer field in the Golan Heights that killed between 12 and 16 Druze boys that were playing a soccer game?
Yeah, this is, I think it's entirely a pretext. Let's call it a false flag. I don't know if Israel, in my mind, I think either Israel staged it, caused it to happen, or it was an errant Iron Dome missile that hit that field. And then Israel is now using that as a pretext. So why I think it was staged is the timing, again, the timing of all of this. It's not just a happy or unhappy coincidence. The Netanyahu comes off his trip to the United States, where he got the green light to attack into Lebanon and to go and try to destroy Hezbollah. And in their mind, also going after Iran. They wanted assurances that the United States would have their back. And how do we know this? Well, we've got the foreign minister, Katz, saying as much. And he says as much right after this, attack on the soccer field. Problem is, this isn't the Hezbollah mark. Hezbollah doesn't have a record of doing this, particularly since they're not Israelis. These are Syrian citizens, as Alistair Crook correctly pointed out earlier today on your show. They are Syrians, and they're Christians and Druze. So they're not Jews. And notice that in the 8 months, Hezbollah has been tossing missiles and rockets and mortars into Israel. They haven't killed They haven't killed civilians in Israel. They've been going after military targets. You say, "Oh, how do you know that?" Well, have you seen any of the publicity like you've seen connected with this incident? Even though this incident didn't actually kill real Israelis. It's Israelis who've been taken in hostage by virtue of an Israeli military occupation. So you've not seen the Israelis out, they talk about all the children that were killed on October 7th, and yet don't show you a single photograph, don't show you a single burial, nothing. But, you got to take their word for it. So just the fact that you don't have that evidence, and Hezbollah in the past, when they've made mistakes, when they've done something that they didn't intend to do, they've come out and admitted it. Israel is looking for a pretext to start this war, and they have it now, and they're going to press forward.
Wouldn't the IDF, which has effectively failed in Gaza, which is effectively a reservist military, not a professional military, and which is effectively exhausted, tell Netanyahu the last thing we're ready for is a massive war against Hezbollah?
apparently they have communicated that. I mean, you saw, we talked about this 4 or 5 weeks ago, where the IDF was coming out and saying, "Hey, we're not going to defeat Hamas. They can't defeat an idea." And thank God they finally came to that realization. But that has not been enough to quell the desire of these rabid religionists who are keen on fulfilling what they see as biblical prophecy, and so they're going to go after Hezbollah and destroy them. They think, and this is getting really dangerous, because if it is true that the Europeans and the United States gave the Israelis a green light, a thumbs up, yeah, go ahead and do this, this will not only probably spark a wider regional war, but really has the potential to escalate into something global, and not going to be a good re-election campaign for Biden, Harris, or Harris alone.
Here's President Erdogan earlier today saying that Turkey might have to enter Israel. Cut number 5.
What was our import-export ratio in the defense industry? Where have we come to? But my dear brothers and sisters, let none of these fool us, or should deceive us. We must be very strong so that this Israel cannot do these ridiculous things to Palestine. Just as we entered Karabakh, just as we entered Libya, we will do the same to them. There is no reason for us not to. We only have to be strong so that we can take these steps.
Is this a serious threat?
Yes, and in fact, let's recall that Pakistan has promised Turkey that it would have access to Pakistan's nuclear weapons in the event that Turkey is attacked by Israel. And then on top of this, let's not forget there were conversations. There was a meeting last week in Moscow between Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, and Vladimir Putin. So, they're not just talking about great vacation spots on the Syrian beaches. They're talking about what the future holds with respect to a possible expansion of the war by Israel into Lebanon and also into Syria, because from Israel's standpoint, they see both as a threat that they must defeat. So this is a very volatile situation. Yeah, Erdogan in the past, he's been known to talk a big game and not do much, but his rhetoric on this really ups the ante in a way that he hasn't before.
If the United States did help Hezbollah, in what form would help Israel fight Hezbollah? In what form would that aid come?
It would be deja vu all over again. Last time the United States got heavily involved militarily was in 1983. We had battleships off the coast of Lebanon. The battleships were firing their huge shells into the Bekaa Valley, and killing Hezbollah folks, families, as well as fighters. And Hezbollah, through a fellow named Ibn Mughniya, who was directly supported by Iran at the time, they carried out the bombings of the U.S. Embassy and the bombing of the Marine barracks. And that Marine barracks killed, dozens of Marines. And it was after that the United States sort of backed out. So what we're looking at here would be our ships, instead of firing, battleships firing, they're going to be firing cruise missiles. You probably have an aircraft carrier launching airstrikes. But again, we haven't learned anything over the course of the last 50 years. Airstrikes do not defeat a ground-based enemy that's dug in. Just ask the Houthis. Here we've had the United States blasting away at them now for 8 months. And what does it achieve? Nothing. It hasn't opened up the Red Sea. So, but what it does do is, if the United States decides to get directly involved in the conflict, there'll be a risk that some U.S. fixed-wing aircraft would get shot down. Pilots will be taken captive, and I can't rule out that there will be attacks on U.S. installations, military and diplomatic, around the world. So that, they'll retaliate.
Here's somebody who knows well the history of the region and American diplomatic and military failures. Cut number 3.
When the United States entered the world stage in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, how did it end? What peaceful changes for the better occurred there? Now, when they repeat like a mantra, "We will support Ukraine for as long as it takes," I'm curious, how long will it take? Like in Afghanistan, where it took 20 years to realize that you lost, or in Iraq, where you also left, although now you are trying to stay despite the Iraqi parliament's decision that the U.S. should withdraw its troops. Or like in Libya, where the state collapsed, and now everyone is trying to piece it back together. A multipolar world is a reality. It's not something someone invented.
Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, he has forgotten more than Tony Blinken has ever known.
Yeah, I mean, the stature of the man, and he's not just big, tall physically. He is intellectually big and tall, and widely respected around the world. Whereas we've got the little Pushin in the person of Anthony Blinken, who is not respected, not admired, and not listened to. So, Lavrov was exactly, he wasn't exaggerating in calling out the failures of U.S. foreign policy over the last 24 years. I mean, we're now almost a quarter of a century into the 21st century, and it's been just a record of unmitigated failure on the part of the United States in terms of foreign policy, and particularly in terms of building international coalitions and working with others. We've gotten to the position now that you either do what we tell you to do, or we're going to hit you with sanctions, we're going to destabilize you with CIA covert actions, or we'll go to war with you. And that, the rest of the world is saying, enough. No, we're not up with that anymore.
Before we go, Larry, do you think that NATO and the EU are preparing for war with Russia?
Verbally, yes, but they've not taken the steps needed to, one, reignite the industries that no longer exist for producing the weapons that they would need inside if they decided to go that route. But the bellicosity of the rhetoric is such that when you're Russia listening to it, you can't make the assumption that they're just talking through their hat. No, you have to assume they're serious about this. So I fear that Europe will exaggerate or be self-deluded about their own capabilities, and then they're going to get into a fight that they'll take a beating, a severe beating.
Larry Johnson, it's a pleasure, my dear friend. Look forward to chatting with you with that youngster Ray McGovern on Friday afternoon. I'm happy to be back to the old routine. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, and welcome back.
Thank you, Larry. All the best. And coming up at 3:00 this afternoon on many of these same subjects, Ambassador Charles Freeman, Judge Napolitano for judging at 2:00.